Hey, Team BCN. Dr. Lisa King, Holly Bender, Pam Dixon, and Susan Houston join our podcast conversation today to talk about our bereavement services and Camp Hope. Camp Hope is a free one-day children's bereavement camp for children ages 6 to 17 and their caregivers who have experienced the death of a loved one in the last 2 years. In this conversation with our bereavement counselors, social workers, and camp directors, we'll talk about how Camp Hope provides an opportunity for participants to express their grief and develop effective coping strategies in a fun, safe, and supportive environment. So ladies, thanks for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So to kick this off, let's start with some introductions. So starting with Dr. Lisa King, would each of you tell us a little bit about who you are, your role at BCN, and the work that you do?
Thanks. This is Lisa King. I've had a couple of different hats at BCN. I've been here since January of 2020. So I started in bereavement in November of last year. And finally, I found my tribe. I call them Susan and Pam and Holly and Renee, and all of them have been my tribe. It's been so nice to have a team to work with and to get to know folks on a more personal and professional level. I have been interested in bereavement since my mom died in 2001, the week after I started my doctoral training. And then 9 days later, we had 9/11 happen. And so we had this national grief that we were suffering. And then I had this very personal grief. And through that, I sought my own mental health counseling because graduate school is not fun, not easy. But also I found a grief group. It wasn't affiliated with a hospice of any kind, but I found that it was very, very helpful. And knew that at some point in time, I would either be doing bereavement services, like just kind of as a sideline to my own private practice, or I didn't know what it would look like, but I knew that I always wanted to include that as part of what I did. So that's how I got started.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Holly, what about you? How did you come to work at BCN, and what attracted you to work in bereavement?
Well, I've been a bereavement counselor here at BCN. I just had my 7th anniversary. Before that, I was a child and family therapist. And although I've had a lot of different experiences with loss or with family members in hospice, I think what really got me interested was one of my original experiences when my niece and nephew, ages 8 and 13 at the time, lost their dad to suicide. And their mom just wasn't handling it well. So they came and lived with me that summer. And I got him involved in a children's bereavement camp. And my 13-year-old nephew did not want to do that. I knew it would be great for them to go. And I persuaded him. And it was such a valuable experience for both of them that he actually begged to go back the next year. They both just really got a lot out of it. And that was just everything to me, was to see how they got some healing out of that experience. So I think that was maybe what started the whole thing off.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Susan?
I have just had my 13th year anniversary with BCN and started as a bereavement counselor and have stayed there. I too came from a background of mental health, family therapy, primarily children's therapy. And I had done that for many, many years. And I had a friend say, we had this bereavement counselor position open with hospice, and you might be a good fit for that. So I called and spoke with Pam and was just so humbled by her presence, certainly. And then I met Monica, and I just felt like this was a good fit and time for me to change gears, because even though there's a lot of mental health to grief, I just feel like it's a different, deeper kind of experience, and one here in the mountains that we just kind of not necessarily take for granted, but we just look at it differently in that I think most people feel like, we're in the Bible Belt, so I'll get God to help me. And it's amazing what can come out of bereavement sessions. So I'm just real humbled to be here.
Mm-hmm. Pam, what about you?
I have been with hospice so long that it's hard to remember what was before hospice. I started in 2001 as a social worker on the hospice team and did that for many years. And in fact, 2001 was the first year that we had our Camp Hope in Eastern Kentucky. I think prior to that, we had only had the Central Kentucky Camp Hope. So I was very fortunate to be here the very first year that we started that in our region. So anyway, did hospice work as on the home team for many years and then became counseling supervisor. And then I think in 2019 became regional counseling supervisor. So I work with the bereavement counselors in all three of our regional offices in Hazard and Barberville and in Pikeville, as well as the social workers and the chaplains in those offices.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Bluegrass Care Navigators offers a variety of grief care services, not only for our patients and families, but for anyone in the community who has experienced a loss. What are a few of the services that we provide? So I know we do community-based outreach, individual bereavement counseling support groups, and some holiday programs. So Susan, would you start us off talking about community-based grief outreach?
We were talking about this in our bereavement meeting, and I'm so thankful that you're addressing this, because I think it was Holly who said, I think folks don't really understand all that we do, that it's more than just doing bereavement counseling. And so we started talking, and the others in the bereavement group shared with me things that they do. But we in Eastern Kentucky, we do a lot of outreach, primarily actually with debriefings, where hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, schools will reach out to us when a staff person has passed away. And the staff has just had a really difficult time with that. And so we go in and provide just an opportunity for them to share their own feelings and thoughts about the person who passed away, as well as some education to them. We do a lot of grief. We call them grief one-on-one presentations, generally around the holidays. And again, those generally go into like nursing homes and clinics and hospitals and that sort of thing. Just gives the staff an opportunity to learn how to cope with holiday grief, especially those working in nursing homes who lose so many and never have a chance to actually grieve those residents that they lose. We provide a lot of school-based crisis intervention. We've done when a student has completed suicide. Recently, there was a school, not a school shooting, but a shooting that involved a third grader and a fourth grader, and I was asked to come into the school to provide support for some of the staff and the students in the third and first grade class. We did a lot of work, outreach with the flood. We went into campgrounds, state parks to do art projects primarily with the children so that they could express those feelings. And then we took that to the schools once schools were in session and met with the entire schools, several schools in our area. And one of the wonderful things about that is one of our social workers here, Samantha Kraft, had developed this awesome and intense resource manual, and she would go with us, and while we were working with the children, she was working with the parents to let them know what they would need to sign up for this support and that support. I know Christy in our Pikeville offices was present to offer support to the community when the 3 police officers and the K-9 officer were killed after responding to a domestic violence situation. And then she also set up a table at Hillbilly Days and was well received, especially about Camp Hope, with folks very interested in Camp Hope. And I know I'm taking a lot of time, and I'm sorry, but
You're fine. You're fine.
Holly shared that she had done a presentation for the BCN volunteers on grief one-on-one and self-care. as well as grief education presentations at local nursing homes. She often does education for Fayette and Jessamine County schools on how to support grieving children. And I know she was a mainstay and a main player in developing the grief toolbox for Fayette County schools. And if she wants to speak more about that, that would be good. Of course, offering crisis response to businesses and communities and apartment complexes, as well as the schools. And she said that she's often invited to be the guest speaker of community groups, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Renee shared that she, in Lexington, she attends the Survivors of Suicide group and Survivors of Homicide group, is led by the Lexington Police Department, and that those meetings are held quarterly, and she provides education and support on behalf of BCN Grief Care. Dr. King does quarterly education at the Hope Center for Women, which I think is awesome. And I know that Nancy Kramer, our bereavement counselor in our Northern Kentucky area, meets often with seniors at senior citizens groups to talk about grief and coping strategies. And I have no doubt that our Cynthiana offices, Mary McKenzie, and in Frankfurt office, Susan McVeigh, do lots of community outreach as well. So I think we're a very valuable community resource.
You are. You for sure are.
That's a lot of stuff. And I know how busy our bereavement counselors are. And that they take on these additional activities just really humbles me and makes me really proud to be a part of this group.
That's awesome. Thanks for giving us that overview of the community-based outreach programs that BCN is part of. So I know that we also offer individual bereavement counseling. So Dr. King, if you could talk to us for a little bit about what that looks like.
I wanted to kind of piggyback off of Susan, is that sometimes we'll get calls about losses that aren't death related. And so, we offer community resources that we can refer folks to if they're looking for something that might be along the realm of, a generalized grief group or, mental health services. We kind of keep tabs on what's going on in our community so that we can refer people on. But individual is, I tell my folks, I said, it's going to feel a lot like, going to see a therapist. I said, because that's how we're trained. We're trained in mental health counseling. But the difference is, we really kind of try to stay in the lane of grief work. And of course, there is some overlap with, depression and anxiety that come along with those huge life changes. Because as you can imagine, losing a spouse or partner or a parent or a child, there isn't just one loss involved. There are multiple layers of loss that we're dealing with. And so we are blessed that with our hospice families, we get to offer a year with them and helping them get through all those firsts, the first birthday, the holidays, the first anniversary, and trying to walk with them during that journey. It's really very much a privilege because people come in at some of the most vulnerable times in their lives and are inviting us to walk with them. And so it's a big, big privilege to be able to do that. Having said that, our community referrals can often sometimes be our most devastating, I think, and complex, because very often they are the folks who die unexpectedly, accidents, accidental overdose, suicide, homicide. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done rather quickly. And so often we are trying to team up with community referrals because we know that 4 to 6 sessions is not going to be enough. Fortunately, we do have the support groups to also fall back on, which I'll let Holly talk about a little bit. But
I feel like you've done a great job giving us an overview about it. I guess I do have one question. So you mentioned that it is for hospice patients, and I think you talked about the community aspect as well. But it's for both. You offer grief care is individual for the community, or is it just for the hospice patients' families?
Individual is for hospice and community. And I forgot to mention that we do have what we call pre-bereavement services. So, for instance, maybe grandma is a hospice patient and there are, some kiddos who don't quite understand what's happening and parents who don't really know what do we tell the kids. So we can also offer pre-bereavement services to help folks prepare for, what might be next.
Hmm. That's so helpful. All of it is, but just you're walking with people every step of the way. And I think that's, as you put it, it's a privilege. It's also a beautiful thing that you're doing, you and your team are doing for people. So you mentioned support groups, Dr. King. So I'm going to move on to Holly and invite her to share a little bit about what those options look like for people.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to be able to offer to be part of a team, an organization that can offer such a variety of support groups, because support is such a different kind, a group is such a different kind of support than you get in individual counseling, and both are wonderful, necessary, and important, but they're very different from each other, and so it's nice to be able to offer that opportunity, and also just the number of different kinds of support groups. And since COVID, one of the things we've been able to do, because of course we had to switch to Zoom there in 2020 in order to continue to provide our services, we now, although we still do provide our in-person groups, have the opportunity to also provide the telehealth or virtual support groups as well. That's been really beneficial for people who could participate from all over the state in all 32 of our counties that we cover, so that we can offer the groups more often, because we can get enough numbers to form a group on a more regular basis. But the groups that we offer, and they can vary from time to time, but we pretty regularly offer our spouse loss support groups, and those are held both in person and virtually, almost back to back, sometimes two at once, I think, because there's just such a need for it. And then we have a parent loss support group. Right now, that has mainly been held virtually since the pandemic, but that's been one of those that we can offer on a more regular basis, because we're pulling people from different counties together, which is wonderful. And then our children's grief groups are also both in person and virtual. These groups that I've mentioned are held for 6 consecutive weeks, and then that group ends, and then we start planning our next group. But we also do offer monthly groups, and some of those are like Cynthiana offers a men's drop-in. This is the next set of groups for that's going to be beginning in June. At times, Northern Kentucky will do a general grief loss group, which is a monthly group as well. And then Dr. King does a monthly adult child loss group that's in person in our Lexington office. And then another thing I love about our virtual groups is both Susan and Nancy from different parts of the state co-facilitate a caregivers monthly group. And that again is one of those things that we've been able to do since we've started the virtual groups, which have been really helpful for many people who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend. And then all of our offices offer different kinds of groups around the holidays. These are both in-person, virtual, might range for anywhere from 1 week to 6-week sessions. There's always a big push for support around the holidays. As you can imagine, it's a very difficult time for people. And I think that covers our groups.
I'm learning so many things because I knew about some of these. I had no idea how broad the scope of the support groups are. So I appreciate you enlightening me a little bit too.
Well, absolutely. And one thing I want to add is, as Dr. King was talking about, and also Susan, we collaborate so well with the community. So we don't offer groups maybe for specific substance use loss or suicide loss. But because we collaborate so well with community, we can still offer those kinds of supports. So we don't really need to have those groups because those groups are running very well in the community and we can refer people to those. So we refer a lot back and forth.
That's really awesome. That's awesome. So, Pam, this has been hinted at our holiday programming by both Holly and Susan. But would you kind of wrap up this part of our conversation by talking to us a little bit about what the holiday programs look like?
Sure. And our holiday programs really vary across all of our regional offices within BCN. So it varies from office to office. I think in Northern Kentucky, Nancy offers an in person 6-week holiday group. Mary McKenzie and Cynthiana, usually in November, December, she does a lot of like a holiday workshop where she invites people to come in and they may make some kind of memory, whether it be a topiary or even an ornament. And then I think Holly, and she may want to speak a little bit more to this in November, invite people to come together to make a fabric keepsake in the shape of a heart out of the material that belonged to their loved one. And we have our wonderful hospice volunteers that we couldn't make it without there, and they help with the sewing machines to help finish that process. Even prior to the pandemic, we're getting back to doing more things in person. A lot of the end of year things that we do in the offices have to do with just, in whatever capacity that we offer, really talking to people about how to engage in the holidays now that they've lost their loved one. I think we can all agree that the holidays are a very stressful time of the year. And I think a lot of external pressures are put upon us to carry on in the same way that we've always participated in holidays, but that may or may not feel right to that person now that they've lost that loved one. So a lot of the things that we offer in various ways, we still try to incorporate that in and giving the person permission to engage in those holidays, differently with whatever that means to them. And, sometimes we do offer other groups around other holidays, not just Christmas or Thanksgiving. But I think, again, Mary McKenzie near Valentine's Day, she has a memory heart group where those clients also bring in clothes of their loved ones to make a heart pillow. Or sometimes we may have things around workshops around Mother's Day. So just, various holidays throughout the year.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I just want to say thank you all for the work that you do day in and day out for our bereavement team, because we're going to move to Camp Hope in just a minute, but you guys are busy all year long helping people process their grief, and there's so much of it. So just know that what you're doing is much appreciated. So, but moving on to Camp Hope, as I mentioned at the top of the show, it's a free day-long camp designed for children ages 6 to 17 and their caregivers who've experienced a loss in the last 2 years. So this year we have 2 camp options for families in Central and Eastern Kentucky. How does Camp Hope help children develop effective coping strategies in a fun and safe setting so they have the tools they need to deal with their recent loss as well as future losses?
I don't mind to start with this one. That's one of the things I love about camp is that we offer kids a lot of different areas to explore their feelings and to learn how to cope with them. Because with kids, especially with anyone, but with kids especially, they just have to find what's the right fit for them, whether it's physical activity, art, music, talking about it, whatever it might be. And so we provide all of these kinds of opportunities through camp, and they get to explore what might work best for them. We work with the integrative medicine team quite often and have, pet therapy dogs, their music therapists, their art therapists come in. Our Central Kentucky camp where we'll be working with horses, a lot of physical activity. So sometimes we do yoga. We mix it up every year, but what we always stick with is really finding a lot of different ways that kids can learn how to express their feelings and cope with their feelings so that they can hopefully find the best fit for themselves.
Gotcha. That's so helpful. How do caregivers interact with each other and their child during the day? Because am I right? It's not just for the children. Their caregivers come along and are part of the experience as well.
We offer caregiver groups, parent guardian groups at the same time as the kids are participating in their own groups. But it starts out with family activities. So families are together and then there's an icebreaker. So that kind of sets the tone of togetherness, if you will. And then we get back together at the end of the day for the burning of the burdens, which we can talk about a little bit later. But ladies, do you have anything to share about that?
At the Central Kentucky camp this year, we are thinking about having the adults go through the same rotations that the kids do. So they'll be doing the equine, they'll be doing giant swing, labyrinth, all of these things, so that they have the same experience as the kids. They we can also give them questions and probes that they can ask their kids about, what was this experience like for you? Like for the giant swing, what did you decide you needed to let go of? They will be literally doing everything that their kids are doing and being able to process that with other adults, just as the kids are processing their experience with their same age peers.
That's awesome. I realize it may be a little early in the planning period because we're recording in May and Camp Hope isn't until late summer, early fall. But what are some things that are planned for Camp Hope this year? I know you mentioned a couple of them, but what does the day look like?
Well, there'll be two different camps, so we'll let Susan and Pam talk, and then Holly and I can talk about the Central Kentucky one.
Okay, that sounds great. Susan, why don't you kick us off talking about Eastern Kentucky?
Our venue is going to be at 4-Star Village, which is normally a wedding venue, but it's set in a beautiful location on top of a hill. We'll be starting with an icebreaker so folks get a little more comfortable, and then we'll do a family activity, and then we separate into groups according to age, and there's music and coping skills and feelings. And then we do this one activity, which is kind of like an after lunch thing the kids can go to that we just love. It's called an emoji game, which there's these giant emojis, and the kids get to throw water balloons at them. But it's a very telling thing. So many, like from last year, I keep thinking of those kids' faces and how many in my particular group just blasted the anger emoji, which spoke volumes of what they were. And then during lunch, we write a letter, parents and children, to their loved ones that in the day, we call it the burning of the burdens. And we have a campfire, and our integrative medicine team is playing softly. It's probably my favorite thing about Camp Hope. Well, I don't know that I have a favorite, but I really love that. And then the kids, one by one, or sometimes as a family, will come and put their letters into the fire as a symbolism of either letting go or connecting with their loved one in heaven. And then, because we don't want the day to end on such an emotional time, we have goodies like, I think we'll do cupcakes again this year. That worked out real well. That concludes the day.
Moving on to our Central Kentucky Camp Hope, Holly and Dr. King, would you talk to us about what will happen for that Camp Hope?
Yeah, this year we are going back to Life Adventure Center, which Holly has been to before, so she can speak to more eloquently than I can. But we have decided with them on 4 different rotations, one called the Giant Swing, 3 islands, equine, and labyrinth, and of course ending the day at the fire pit as well. But I'll let Holly kind of, since she's been there and led it at Life Adventure Center, I'll let her talk a little bit more about that.
Well, we do these really cool activities, which are both low and high ropes, with just the names that Lisa was talking about. But what we try to do is incorporate a grief objective into each physical activity that the teams will work through together. And we want to give them the opportunity to share their grief story, to learn healthy coping strategies, to communicate well, to be able to identify and talk about their feelings, and then the importance of remembering and talking about their loved ones. So each one of these activities is paired with one of those objectives, and they're led by bereavement counselors and social workers who can help them really talk through and understand those feelings. Like they were talking about earlier, they'll touch base with their family members throughout the day where they can kind of catch up. And they're also experiencing, even though they are doing things on a different level, very similar kinds of objectives and activities as well. It's just a good day for people to be able to have fun and make connections while they're also talking about hard things, but in a way that feels safe, to learn some things that will really be able to help them heal as peer groups, but then also as a family moving forward as well.
Absolutely. Because I think when I was talking to Susan and Samantha Kraft about the work that they were doing in Eastern Kentucky, it sounds like it's in addition to helping individuals get through their own grief, Holly, it's helping families connect with each other and learn how to process that grief as a family unit, which is sometimes difficult for parents and children to figure out the right words to say.
Absolutely. And just to provide that grief education and permission to talk about it and tools to express and communicate openly so that they have the confidence moving forward to know that they're doing it in a healthy way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, this is a question that I'm going to ask each of you, and I want to be mindful of our time as well. So, but for you, each of you, what is the best part of Camp Hope? It could be a child's life you've seen change, maybe something that's impacted your own life. Just what is the best part of Camp Hope? And Holly, since we've been talking, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. That is the easiest question for me to answer because what we know about children in grief is that they feel alone. They don't think anyone else gets it. They don't know that other people are experiencing similar situations as well. And so when you see those kids come together and they're divided into groups of the same age, and then they see that there are other people going through what they're going through, they're not alone anymore. And that peer connection and that understanding where other people get it. I mean, it is okay to learn to talk about your feelings, to express your feelings, just being able to see kids make those connections and those friendships. And above all, when those friendships last. There were two 11-year-old boys in 2018. I remember, I'll never forget them. They both had very sudden and traumatic losses of their father or father figure. And those boys connected immediately on the bus ride to camp. They were inseparable during camp. It was overnight at that time. And then 2 weeks later, we had a reunion in which both of those boys came running into the room, so happy to say that they found out that they go to the same school and that they actually are neighbors and they see each other every day, are now best friends. And then just a few months ago, maybe a year ago, I happened to run into one of the mothers, and she said they're still best friends. And just to know that they have that lifelong connection where they can continue to help each other heal as they grow. I mean, that's to me what camp is all about.
Absolutely. Dr. King, what's the best part of Camp Hope for you?
Well, I've only gotten to see one, but I was really moved watching this young girl, probably first, second grade, come into camp very shy, hiding behind her guardian, wouldn't interact, wouldn't approach the therapy dogs. And just by the end of the day, she was running around, giggling and laughing, and had made a best friend and was hugging the dogs. And it was just quite a transformation in just a few hours.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Susan, what about you? What's the best part?
Well, I will have to echo Holly's words. It's when I work with kids individually and ask them, because they feel so alone and they feel like nobody's ever experienced what they've gone through. And oftentimes I will say, do you know any students in your class who have lost people? And I always get, no, I don't. But at camp, it just normalizes, oh, wow, I am not the only person to experience this. And there is, I love that the ages are congruent so they're all pretty much on the same level and reacting, understanding it. And our activities are designed that way. But just that they know they're not alone. And as Dr. King said, you can see from the hesitancy in the morning compared to by the end of the day, just this beautiful transformation. And it's just so humbling to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
It's just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Pam, what's the best part of Camp Hope for you?
Well, I have to agree with all of these ladies because, you see the kids arrive, even the guardians, with body language that says, I'm not sure what this is. I'm not sure why, what this is going to be about. And then at the end of the day, you see that connection that kids have made with other kids and guardians have made with other guardians, and just the impact that Camp Hope has, and just in just that day of finding that thing in common that they can't necessarily talk to their neighbor about, or even a close friend. So it makes a tremendous impact, and it makes me remember that several years ago we had a young lady, she's probably in her early 20s, that came back and volunteered at camp because she was a camper herself as a child. And so the impact that Camp Hope made on her was a lasting impact that she wanted to come back and give that back.
That's beautiful. All your best parts have just been beautiful, and I really appreciate you giving me a gift by sharing them. So thank you so much for that. Registration for Camp Hope for the Eastern Kentucky Camp Hope is open until August 1st, and for Central Kentucky Camp Hope it's September 1st. And you can register at bgcarenav.org/camp-hope. So before I let all you ladies go today, we've had a wonderful conversation, but is there anything else you'd like to mention that we haven't already talked about? And Susan, I'll let you go first since I know you need to hop off here soon.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing us, because I forgot something very important, I feel. Working with Whitney Clay, we have received this grant in Eastern Kentucky. It's called the Legacy Art Project. And Pam could speak more to this, but Kelly Callahan, our volunteer coordinator, and I are working together to develop a group where clients, family members who have lost somebody will come in and create this piece of art. There's brooches, there's other things. I know that when Whitney did the first training, they made these beautiful brooches out of the loved one's clothes or whatever, but doesn't have to be. And so there's more to come on that, but I'm just really appreciative that we got that grant and Whitney's leadership with that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Pam, Dr. King, Holly, do you have anything else that you'd like to mention that we haven't talked about? Dr. King.
I would just like to say that we can't pull off Camp Hope without our community and staff volunteers. They play a big role for camp needs, during camp needs. Just that the planning committees for both camps, this is, a 9 to 10 month planning commitment. And so I just really appreciate them mentoring me and teaching me so that I can hopefully keep doing this for a while.
Yeah, for sure. Pam, Holly, anything? I don't want to leave anybody out.
I just want to say that I'm thankful for all of our grief counselors. These ladies juggle many, many things, as you've heard today. In just the span of the day, they may be doing several different things, from individual counseling to groups to, getting a call from the community with a crisis. So they're very dedicated, and we're just so appreciative to have them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Holly?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity for us to be able to come together and share about our grief care department and the things that we do, and for us to get to spend time with all these people on the call today. Thanks.
No problem. It was my pleasure to have you guys, and I just really enjoyed hearing more about the work that you guys do every day. I so appreciate what you guys do. So thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.